Oh my god, I so can't wait for season 11 of the X-Files coming out soon, and we're celebrating with a very special kind of list. Hello and welcome to Sci-Fi-Night. I'm your host, Sebastian Vendel-Martinez, and as is usually the case when we have kind of a theme going on, we like to finish with a top 5. But we're doing something a little bit different for this list. So chances are, if you've watched this channel at least a little bit, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of the X-Files, as evidenced by all this X-Files content we've got on the channel. But with over 200 episodes of the show, it was pretty much impossible for me to narrow down a top 5. Hell, even a top 20 would be hard. There's just so much good stuff. Too many classic monsters, too many interesting conspiracies, too many great moments. It meant that I had to, for the first time ever, do a Sci-Fi Night top 10 X-Files episodes. I should probably just state though, I'm not a huge fan of a light-hearted comedic episodes, so if I've skipped a few classics, that's why, but you'll still see a nice mix of serious, light-hearted, story-based, and standalone episodes. Also, another disclaimer, I'm going to count 2-part or 3-part episodes as one entry, as they're basically one connected story from start to finish. Alright, well guess what, even narrowing it down to 10 episodes was too hard for me, so we're going to hit you guys with not 1, not 2, but 3 honorable mentions. Alright, time is tight, so let's get right to it. The first honorable mention is Season 6, Episode 18, Milagro. In it, we follow an author whose written works are coming to life. It's just a shame that he's writing about a killer snatching people's hearts. The writer later falls in love with Scully and starts writing about her. And that's where I'm going to stop it, not to spoil anything. So this is a surprisingly heartfelt and interesting episode, and if you're longing for a romance between Mulder and Scully, this gives you something to cheer for. The second honorable mention goes to Season 5, Episode 12, Bad Blood. And oh man, this is one of the best comedy episodes ever, and it was really hard not to include it in the top 10. In it, Mulder hunts and ends up killing a vampire, who turns out to be a human.
Oh, shit.
While awaiting interrogation, he and Scully must get their story straight, leading to 2 very different interpretations of the same event, in which we get to see how Scully and Mulder perceive themselves and the other. And it's just great insight in how they reason. And this episode just has so many funny moments, it could probably be the funniest episode ever, and is well worth a high spot on any list. And the last honorable mention goes to Phonus, Season 6, Episode 10. This is such an amazing episode, it makes me want to scream at people who haven't seen it. In this Scully-centered episode, she follows a man who always seems to be at the crime scene taking pictures before death has actually occurred, as if he's waiting for people to die. The reasons for this I'm not gonna spoil because of how great everything turns out. This barely missed the list, just fucking watch it, it's great.
I'm thinking murder by telekinesis. I'm thinking maybe a shamanistic death touch. I'm thinking about the Muslim superstition that to photograph someone is to steal their soul.
Thank you. All very helpful.
Alright, so with that ADHD Mountain Dew style rundown of the honorable mentions, let's get to the number 10 spot, which goes to Sunshine Days. Alright, so I know a lot of people hate Season 9, and I can understand that, but hear me out with this one. Our list kicks off with the second last episode ever of the original run, Season 9, Episode 18, written by Breaking Bad creator Vince Gilligan, and honestly, this is a better finish to the series than the actual series finale. This is an episode I thought wouldn't work for me, but obviously it ended up being one of the best. In it, Scully, Doggett, and Reyes investigate a strange case of people falling from extreme heights to their deaths near a random suburban house and a man who seems obsessed with a Brady Bunch. And not only that, but this leads to our agents getting their hands on undeniable, irrefutable proof of the supernatural, but it comes at a cost. Alright, so I'm not going to spoil the twist, but oh man, this episode just hits me right in the feels. I know a lot of people hate Season 9, and like I said, I get that, but for me, this was such a heartfelt and playful send-off to the new agents, finally getting a hold of working with supernatural cases.
The deceased shot straight up through the roof, flew high into the air, and landed on his buddy's car. You're serious?
A to B to C. Can I tell you, I think I'm finally getting the hang of this job.
And it's without a doubt one of the more emotional episodes of the last 2 seasons, but in a good way, of course. Instead of a tragic death of a beloved character or harsh insight in the brutality of the world, we instead get a very rare feel-good episode that's actually really heartwarming and endearing. It's an emotional statement about the spirit of the X-Files itself and how the search for the truth itself is more important than actually proving it. Despite Season 9 being a little sleepy and very different from others, Sunshine Days is proof that the X-Files always delivered great stories even towards the end of the original series run.
Well, maybe I've had it these past 9 years. If not proof of the paranormal, then of more important things.
Alright, so that brings us to a number 9 spot and an episode that I talked about earlier, Via Negativa. So yeah, I brought this up in our top 5 scariest X-Files video, which you can view by clicking the link in the description, and here it is again because of how awesome it is. In this episode, Agent Doggett and A.D. Skinner are thrown into the chase of a cult leader who, through some kind of drugs, has managed to reach a higher plane of consciousness using this dark power to enter people's dreams and kill them. And yeah, this is hands down one of the darkest and most atmospheric episodes ever. So, without reiterating what I've already said about this episode, Via Negativa is like a short horror thriller film with very moody and atmospheric cinematography, good effects, fantastic acting from Robert Patrick, and a finish to the episode worthy of a top-notch film. By exploring some dark themes and atmosphere we haven't seen before, when it comes to X-Files episodes, Via Negativa is the stuff dreams are made of, or in this case, nightmares. Oh man, it always hurts having that episode so high on the list, but it was outdone by Season 6's Triangle. So first off, this is one of the most unusual, problematic, and ambitious episodes of the X-Files ever attempted. The entire episode consists of just a few long takes with no cuts in between, and we follow Agent Mulder, who, after going through the Bermuda Triangle, winds up on a ship in the 1940s which has been overrun by Nazis and the 1940s versions of people Mulder knows.
As of today, September the 3rd, 1939, this country is at war with Germany.
This leads to a race against time to get Mulder out of the Bermuda Triangle, while he simultaneously tries to change the past. Alright, so full disclosure, at first I didn't even think I would like this episode because of how silly it sounded, but they totally pulled it off and managed to produce one of my favorite episodes ever. You'll never see the X-Files get more operatic or grand than this. It is some of the best shots and cinematography in the show's history, and the long take style really benefits this 3rd episode of the 6th season. This is the X-Files just having fun, doing crazy extreme stuff, and they just totally pull it off here. Overall, this episode has a very timeless feel that uses glitz, glam, and style to get to a number 8 spot.
So you're saying that the Queen Anne just disappeared?
Into the Bermuda Triangle.
And reappeared this morning at 6:49 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
It's impossible.
Oh man, I could do a special on every one of these episodes explaining why it's great, but we're gonna move on to the number 7 spot, a real game-changing episode, the Erlenmeyer Flask. Season 1 of the X-Files ended with a bang as the 24th episode delivered everything, kind of. We get alien-human hybrids chased by police, Scully sees her first alien, Mulder's informant Deep Throat gets killed, Scully has to save Mulder, the X-Files get shut down.
They're shutting us down, Scully.
What?
So yeah, everything kinda happens. Alright, so admittedly, some of that stuff isn't really as groundbreaking as you go further into the show, such as the death of an informant or the X-Files being shut down, but when this first aired, people flipped their shit. So after trying to find a mysterious man chased and shot by police, Mulder and Scully get wrapped up in the type of grand conspiracy that would become a cornerstone of the show. It turned up the tension and made a blockbuster episode to wrap up what had otherwise at that point been kind of a more toned down and less produced show. It also really cemented the alien mythology of the series and let us know what to expect. At the time, it was the biggest episode they'd done, and it still holds up as one of the most exciting pieces of television for its time.
You must put together everything that you have found, and you must find Dr. Sakari before they do. I'll have no further contact with you on this matter.
Alright, so if it seems like we're going fast, it's because we are. The number 6 spot goes to Paper Hearts. Season 4, Episode 10 gave us what is more or less X-Files meets The Silence of the Lambs, as our favorite agents unwillingly find themselves revisiting the child molester and serial killer John Lee Roach, played by Tom Noonan, after that more bodies of his victims are found. In terms of content, this is some of the darkest the X-Files has ever gone, and the emotion packed on is impossible to brush off, as Mulder's whole reason for joining the X-Files was the search for his sister who was abducted by aliens. This is questioned when Roach implies that his final victim actually was Mulder's sister.
Pick her out. What? You choose the one that was your sister, and I'll tell you where she is. I mean, come on, it's a 50-50 chance. Either way, I'm giving you a victim.
This is such a good episode that it really feels like something along the lines of Seven or other great serial killer films. It's tense, it's dark, it's gritty, it's realistic. Both Noonan and David Duchovny deliver fantastic performances. Their basketball chat is brilliant.
Take one from there and I'll tell you. Trust a child molester?
And the final showdown will make you chew your fingers to the bone, well worth the number 6 spot. Alright, so that brings us to the number 5 spot and our first two-parter, Squeeze and Tombs. Okay, so these were technically separated by almost an entire season, but they are connected, so I'm counting it as a two-parter. Anyway, how did a prominent businessman get murdered inside his locked office without a clear way in? Oh yeah, and his liver is missing. This is the work of genetic mutant Eugene Victor Toombs, whose mutation allows him to twist and contort his body in order to reach his victims. Once he gets to them, he kills them and eats their liver so that he can go into hibernation and basically live forever. Right, so this was the 3rd episode of the first season, and the very first not to have anything to do with the overarching alien mythology thing, and still to this day, it's one of the best standalone episodes ever. The first X-Files Monster of the Week, and its finishing off sequel, is one of the best as Toombs is just so damn creepy. He's got the stare of a perverted demon, and this case, which really fleshes out Mulder and Scully's characters, is perfectly tailored for the show. This is essential X-Files done at its best. Mulder and Scully chasing down a paranormal lead with their conflicting methods of approach.
Your testimony, you sounded so...
I don't care how it sounded, as long as it was the truth.
And if I were to try to introduce someone new to the X-Files, I'd probably use this two-parter for it to illustrate what the show is about, because Squeeze and Tombs capture that X-Files essence perfectly, and I think it's a storyline that I've rewatched most times. This episode raised the bar for the X-Files and squeezed its way to the number 5 spot, where it remains.
Are you over 100 years old?
That must be a control question.
I had her ask it.
No.
Alright, the number 4 spot goes to Beyond the Sea. Right, so this is a goddamn masterpiece of an episode. Let me just say that right off. In a super emotional hour of TV, Agent Scully is coping with the death of her father, all while she and Mulder are looking for a serial killer and end up getting some help from convicted murderer Luther Lee Boggs, who Mulder put away many years before. They do this since Boggs claims to be able to see the actions of a serial killer currently on the loose.
Skull, human skull. Silver gray. His eyes cold, very cold, staring at Elizabeth. God, he's got the wire. No, please, no.
He also seems to be able to come into contact with Scully's father after his death. For the first time ever, we see Mulder, who gets a little too personal with the case, turn to the skeptic, while Scully ends up believing in the paranormal and the possibility of her father communicating through Boggs, who is brilliantly played by Brad Dourif. Yeah, but let's face it though, when is Brad Dourif not great? I mean, he always goes all in every single role. I remember this being the first X-Files episode that gripped me emotionally, and for good reason. There's a lot to identify with, and there are scenes that are both creepy and warming. It's all very nicely shot, everyone involved does a great job, and the final showdown with the serial killer, as well as the fate of Boggs, is intense and heart-wrenching. This is X-Files at its core, a criminal investigation influenced by a smaller paranormal element, and though it's kind of basic in comparison to a lot of the stuff they would do in later seasons, this is handled brilliantly and gives us real insight into the heroes we would go on to know and love.
Scully. Avoid the devil. Don't follow Henry to the devil. Leave that to me.
Alright, so it brings us to the number 3 spot, which is appropriate, but I'm kind of almost cheating because it goes to a 3-part episode: Anasazi, The Blessing Way, and Paperclip. The Season 2 finale and the first 2 episodes of Season 3 are great, just great, pure X-Files, and kind of sums up the entire alien mythology story arc, as these 3 episodes basically make for a 2-hour X-Files movie of X-Files conspiracy suspense. So what starts off as a tale about a mysterious tape spilling government secrets ends up being much, much more, and possibly one of the best mythology story arcs ever. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? This story arc has everything. Mulder, Scully, Assistant Director Skinner, the slimy scumbag Alex Krycek, the wonderfully funny lone gunman, the sinister cigarette-smoking man, dead aliens, Nazi scientists, conspiracies, Native American rituals, everything.
You will see for yourself.
So much of what would go on to drive the story is found here, and is done really well. These episodes feel really big and well produced, which they are, and it gives us so much of the essence of the X-Files, it's impossible for fans not to love it. Season 3 probably has the best mythology episodes, and everything here feels fresh and interesting, as I think this was a point where the creators really fleshed out the mythology of a series and gave it that blockbuster feeling. This 3-part episode gives us a driving force of a show, Mulder's search for the truth, and Scully's scientifically skeptic outlook and how important they are to each other. Overall, the journey taken in these 3 episodes will always sum up the X-Files, for me anyway. I basically see these 3 episodes as the backbone of a series, the driving force of the main story, and I love them, obviously, as they're a top 3 choice. It's probably a very personal choice, by the way, but for me, this is when the X-Files was truly established as something timeless.
But these aren't humans, Scully. From the look of it, I'd say they were alien.
Alright, so that brings us to the number 2 spot, and another episode we've actually talked about before, Season 4, Episode 2's Home. Okay, so I already talked about this in our video of the scariest X-Files episode ever, and in it, Mulder and Scully take on a violent family of inbred brothers who are terrorizing a small town. And still to this day, this is the most controversial episode ever, one of the scariest episodes ever, and also one of the best. This episode kicked off the now famously dark Season 4, showing that the X-Files could do visceral and more violent television without losing the classic X-Files charm and Mulder and Scully banter. It delivers true, ghastly horror and rewards you for your discomfort with some great laughs from Mulder.
No.
The sheriff's murder is still haunting, with a contrastingly cheerful music going on. The open ending of the episode adds so much to the overall atmosphere, and if the violence and scares don't get to you, this is an hour of quality television that truly delivers. It may be one of the darkest episodes ever, but like I said, it's also one of the best. A lot of the essence of the X-Files was about how these secrets buried in small towns were coming to light as the world becomes more globalized and smaller. Here we have a clash with very different ways of life. It's a frightening look at how the search for the truth can yield horrible consequences depending on what you find. And once more, this feels like a mini movie, and an excellent one at that.
I've seen and heard some of the sick and horrible things that go on outside my home. At the same time, I knew we couldn't stay hidden forever. That one day the modern world would find us and my hometown would change forever.
Alright, that brings us to the number 1 spot, my favorite X-Files episode ever, Season 3, Episode 4's Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. Alright, so a lot of people have this as their number one spot, which I totally get, obviously. It's got tons of heart, humor, witty writing, some dark parts, and smart moments.
As long as he gives us leads, I don't care how big a kook. Who the hell are you?
Okay, so this is a favorite amongst fans, and I almost wanted to avoid it being my number one spot, but then I started rewatching episodes. I rewatched this one, rewatched it about 2 or 3 more times, and there's just no getting around it. I mean, this is the best.
As far as I know, that's correct.
So in Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, Mulder and Scully are on the heels of a serial killer who's murdering fake psychics and end up running into a man who can actually see into the future, but only see how people are going to die. What follows is one of the most non-stop entertaining episodes ever, and Peter Boyle as a psychic Clyde Bruckman is equal parts hilarious and heartbreaking, giving some great insight into Scully and Mulder's futures, and even winning an Emmy for his fantastic performance.
Mr. Bruckman, this murderer has already committed 4 homicides.
And he'll commit more whether I help you or not.
How can you be so sure?
How could I see the future if it didn't already exist?
But if the future is written, then why bother to do anything?
Now you're catching on.
Every single line of dialogue is great, as it's written by the awesome Darren Morgan, and that should be no surprise. The editing and direction is spot on, and there's a real sense of rhythm and charm. On top of that, it kind of switches up the Mulder and Scully dynamic a bit. It's hard to describe without giving everything away, but the way that all the elements come together here gives a little bit of everything we love about the X-Files. It's got dark murder, like the opening scene is actually pretty grim.
Please, you're hurting me.
I know. And I'm sorry. But you're a fortune teller.
No.
You should have seen this coming.
Please.
Supernatural abilities, witty humor, messages about society, but unlike many others, a deeper message as well. This episode is funny, dark, interesting, sweet, and embodies so many aspects of what make the X-Files great, with a bittersweet ending that really hits home and gives us what is honestly just a wonderfully entertaining episode that is well loved by fans and for good reason. It's the way that Bruckman decides to help them out despite knowing that pretty much everything is pointless, and that kind of just embodies so much for me. And yeah, I mean, what more can I say without spoiling it? This is just an excellent episode, and one that I can honestly always watch no matter what, and for that reason, it's my number one spot.
Now, if you don't mind, I have to get an APB out on a white male, 17 to 34, with or without a beard, maybe a tattoo, who's impotent. Let's go.
So that about does it for this episode of Sci-Fi-Night Top 10, and wait a second, where'd I go? Well, guess what? We had a bit of a technical issue which made the very last part of the video unusable, but the show must go on, and here I am to finish off. This was our Sci-Fi-Night Top 10 favorite X-Files episodes, and we'd love to see what your guys' top 10s are because the fans are so split. We're also super excited for Season 11. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Mr. Bruckman, can you tell us why the killer is murdering people in the way that he is?
Why does anyone do the things they do? Why do I sell insurance? I wish I knew. Why did this woman collect dolls? What was it about her life? Was it one specific moment where she suddenly said, I know?